So we're going to start with the elections. And let's just start with Mom Donnie. Um, I don't really like this. I'll get to my problems with Mondani, and there are many in a moment. But this thing about, Trump said today, it's communism or common sense. I don't think people are choosing communism, which is why they voted for him. Like, people aren't like, oh, let's all be communists, let's all be socialists. He tapped into something, um, not his anti-Semitism. I don't think that's what they were tapping into, but they were tapping into this issue of affordability, this issue that they can't afford to live in New York. I mean, some of the things that he tapped into, especially for the young people, um, this does raise questions about not whether capitalism is good, but that, the system is not working for everybody.
Look, I think you're 100% right, but I also think the language is wrong. Hello, David, and hello, Chava. Thank you for watching live. So, what if you are of a certain age, uh, calling somebody a communist is an insult. If you are under that certain age, it's not. Because the Cold War ended in 1990, and that was, oh my God, it was 35 years ago. I was just doing the math in my head. I was like, that was 3 years ago. That was 35 years ago. And so if you are, if you are a young person under the age of 35, under the age of 40, the idea that, calling someone a communist is somehow a
But it's
terrible
also
insult.
wrong. It's not communism. I mean, there are
Well,
plenty of socialist. I mean, look at Denmark, for instance. Not that we want to be Denmark. I'm just saying, like, this is not like communist red China or, the USSR. And
well,
that's what
first
they're
of all, it's
trying.
not like anything. He hasn't even
That's
been
what,
sworn in.
no, I understand, but
But
that's what they're
but
trying to evoke. And this is not that. Come on.
this is not that. This is socialism. And until Mamdani decided to run for the under the banner of the Democratic Party, he was a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, and we did a great podcast on this last week with Jamie Kirchick, who wrote a fantastic takedown, let me be honest, of the DSA in the Wall Street Journal last week. So we had Jamie on, we talked about it. The DSA was founded by Michael Harrington. Michael Harrington was a socialist, okay? And but but he was very anti-communist because he was very against the Soviet Union, very against Stalinism, very against Castro, very against, what communism was, which was a totalitarian regime that crushed the worker and crushed everybody else under the jackboot of the general, of the party. That's what it was. And he was very adamant about that. He was also a Zionist, right? The Democratic Socialists have, over the last decade and a half, abandoned everything that he stood for, all of the restrictions on actual communists, actual Marxists, actual Stalinists joining, and the Democratic Socialists of America have a platform replete with the red fist, because I went and sat down and read through it, that supports, I kid you not, folks, that supports ending our sanctions on Cuba. Okay, let's say Cuba, fine. Iran, North Korea, right? It is pro-Russian, anti-NATO, right?
Hmm.
Anti-supporting Ukraine, anti-US troops in Europe, troops in Japan,
So they would
anti.
find a lot of common cause with MAGA, actually.
So that's not true. If you look
But
at
just the things, I mean, not the sanctions part, but,
No,
you know,
that's also not true. Look, so again, let me finish for one sec. And we talked about Roger Zakheim and the Reagan Foundation that does this great poll and did this great poll dividing up Republicans between MAGA and non-MAGA. MAGA Republicans are more interventionist, more supportive of Ukraine as a polling matter. But in terms, if you want to liken Tucker Carlson to the Democratic
which
Socialists of
we're going to get
America,
to today. That's
then
who I was talking about. I was talking
right.
about the Tucker Carlsons, Nick Fuentes, which we're also going to.
Right, but those guys aren't
Okay.
MAGA. Those guys are proto-fascists, and I would argue that they have a lot more in common with Mamdani than a normal Democrat. I won't say you, but you and me, a normal Republican, have. Right? We are more like each other, and they are more like each other. Anyway, there it is.
I'm not a Democrat, but okay.
You're an independent.
I'm Democrat adjacent, let's say.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
let's talk about the wider election results and what you think. You know, I know some Republican analysts or pundits like Scott Jennings and such were like, "Oh, it doesn't mean anything." I think I think it means something. I think I'm not going to over dramatize what it means, but it means that, this was Trump said it's because he wasn't on the ballot, which he was not. Um, but it's a disaffection with something. I wouldn't say, you know what I mean? Like, just like they voted, the Democrats out last time in some areas. Um, Now they're, it's a vote against the status quo because nothing's happening. But, government is not functioning.
So the right way to understand this is it's an off-year election, and the White House, the Senate, and the House are controlled by
Bobby, you're not
Republicans.
normal. Don't worry.
I was just thinking that. So the White House, we have solid Republican control over the legislative and the executive branch. Uh, the There is one year that I can think of where the party out of power did not prosper in the off-year elections following that kind of shocking, and that's after 9/11. That's it. Otherwise, the other party benefits. Now, the question is, and this is really, I think, what you're pointing to, is not that the other party benefits, because it does, but when the other party benefits at, in many cases, twice the margin that Kamala Harris had.
Exactly.
In
They all outperformed Kamala Harris.
Not now, that's also, shame on Kamala Harris, but at the same time, absolutely, this is a message. And here's part of the problem. Yes, Donald Trump is answering the mail on immigration to a certain extent, answering the mail on crime. But what is he screwing up? The economy.
Yeah.
Yeah, duh. And, the shutdown isn't helping. And so in this environment, the even for even somebody like Jay Jones, who was the attorney general candidate in Virginia, who was being opposed by just a great, terrific, good guy, Jason Yaris, who I was really hoping was going to win. I knew Winston Marsalis wasn't going to win.
Oh,
I knew the number 2 wasn't going to win, but I was really hoping Miyares was going to win because he's been an outstanding AG. He's really good. He's really solid. And his opponent
was the
wished
one,
to,
if you guys
wished
remember.
to kill the Republican Speaker of the House of Delegates and his children, and still won.
First, watch the children be killed, and then give her 2 bullets, right?
Yes. So, yes, this was how badly the Republicans lost. And when the top of the ticket goes down that hard, then even good guys like Jason Miyares go down hard. I think Republicans were hoping Ciattarelli in New Jersey was going to win. He got his ass kicked. The good thing I'll say, and Mamdani,
We'll talk about,
it's an anti-Semite socialist, not my favorite, but the bad guy who was being backed by Ilhan Omar in Minneapolis lost. Islamist
look,
guy
I think
lost.
what we're
So
seeing is this kind of split in the Democratic Party between the Mamdanis, who, he had this real conciliatory tone
while he was running,
and then the day his acceptance speech, and he had flexibility, and wasn't going to tax the rich, the budget can handle it. Was pretty much of an asshole during his acceptance speech. I was really look, a lot of Democrats were disappointed with that speech because the tone was, he said one, thing, I'm a mayor for all New Yorkers, but that was not the message.
No, the message was
the message was, there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak, and, get with the program. And I think that push could clash with the governor who endorsed him, but,
who's running for re-election next year.
And, if you think that you're going to, be able to deliver on all of those progressive things like free buses, free childcare, free lunches, which I personally think if people need them, They should have them, and not everybody needs them, and they shouldn't have them. But anyway, what I'm saying is, if hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers are going to move out of New York because you're such a, non-inclusive mayor and not governing for all of the New Yorkers, you're going to have a really hard time governing. So if he doesn't deliver, he's going to get his ass booted, just like Adams did, and just like De Blasio did, and
Yep. It's going to be great. Look, I think the big question actually going forward is not whether he fails or succeeds. I think he fails. I think he fails in New York because socialism always fails, because handing out free stuff to people is not actually a thing. Um, uh, so I'm very concerned about the costs of him being mayor, and frankly, I'm very concerned about the safety of Jewish people in New York, and that includes my mother and my daughter. I tell my kids not to wear their Magen David when they're flying on a plane. I don't tell them not to do it when they go out in the streets of New York. But Tevi Troy had a piece about how he covers up his kippah when he's walking through the streets of New York. It's enough to break your heart when that kind of thing happens, and that is the environment that I'm afraid that Mamdani and his supporters not only have worked towards, but that they will deepen.
Well, he did. I mean, he did say in his speech, he did, nod to it in the speech. But then, when he said, I want to end the scourge of anti-Semitism, but then spent twice as much time on Islamophobia, both are bad. But he kind of threw in anti-Semitism in there.
Right, and of course, his Islamophobia claims have been proven to be completely made up in the last 2 weeks. So there's that.
I think most New Yorkers, as a general rule, they're egged on by that kind of stuff. But it's like you said, will he deepen it, or will he?
Or will he make it go away? And I think that the answer is he will make it worse. But the big question for me, and I know we need to move on, but the big question for me, and this is what I wrote about earlier this week, and we'll put it in the show notes. What I wrote about earlier this week is the DSA going to take over the Democratic Party? There are a lot of people who are saying, and that's their aim, by the way. Their aim is not to create
I think that's a little dramatic. I don't think that's going to happen.
New York is a pretty important state, and New York City is a pretty important city, and there's a reason that Osama bin Laden hit it 24 years later.
He won 50%, but how many percent did the rest? Okay, so Cuomo won what, 41%?
Yeah, that doesn't matter. Lose is lose.
But what I'm saying is Silwa and Adams and Cuomo together, Sliwa. I always say, just like I say Mamdani, I say Silwa. He won just over 50%. So that's not exactly a mandate. He may call it a mandate. That's not a real mandate to have the Democratic Socialist Party take over New York City. I mean,
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you. But I think it's important to understand who voted for him, which is everybody under 40. I think it's important to understand 30% of New York City's Jews voted for him, which is just like, what do we call that? A shonda?
A shonda and a chuppah.
That's an outrage, a shame. And so I think that's their ambition. And I think it'll be interesting to watch where the Democratic Party goes, just as there is a fight is going on in the Republican Party. Anyway, go on to your stuff.
I just want to remind that I don't think it was like, those 50% are like, let's be socialist. I think they're looking for someone to make the city more affordable. We'll see if he does it. Supreme Court looks like they're going to give president a big old, you don't, as my brother would say.
Yeah. So this was
on the tariffs.
This was the case that the court heard this week on the tariffs. The Solicitor General went out and, by all accounts, made a complete freaking ass of himself. One of my favorite questions was, I can't remember who asked, but it might have been Gorsuch. So he said, if the next president, if a Democratic president declares a national emergency on climate change, can he do whatever he wants? And the Solicitor General is like taken aback, because apparently his own
He would be.
6-year-old couldn't have told him he was going to get that question.
Right.
And he goes, yes, I think so. And the answer is, let me just tell you, I'm no lawyer, but I often play one on TV. And the idea that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which is we refer to it by its acronym, IEPA, which is the authority that the president
Danny knows
issues,
a thing about, people.
which I do know a thing about. The idea that IEPA gives the president authority to impose tariffs is absolute rubbish. The
Yeah, it's just
language of
not
it,
in the legislation.
it's not there, but it's not just that. The Constitution enumerates very specifically where that power lies, and it is not with the president. And it is another testament to our Congress that went to the court and that Congress didn't deal with it itself.
I also want to say, and we've talked about this before, that a lot of people that say, oh, the Supreme Court is in President Trump's pocket. I don't believe that to be true. They have voted on him. They have supported him in numerous ways. They haven't supported President Trump. They've supported the idea of a strong executive. But I think the questioning, and they voted against him in certain instances. And I think this is one of them where they don't think, I think it was it Amy? Well, Amy Barrett asked about the reimbursements. I don't think that should be actually a factor. It's not there. It's not,
Well, it's going to cost some.
It doesn't matter. You can't do it because, you can't do it because it's too expensive. That means if you shouldn't have done it in the first place, we don't do it just to kind of cover up the crime. The cover up would be worse than the crime. Anyway, I'm mixing my metaphors here, but
you are. And Kat's asking exactly the right question. Why would Congress give up this power? Because Congress doesn't do its job. Not Republicans, not Democrats. Democrats didn't do it under Biden, and the Republicans don't do it under Trump. Congress has given up, and it is pathetic.
It's sad. It's really sad.
All right, let's move on.
And it'll be interesting to see if, the election, and Trump did say, he thinks the shutdown is hurting. It's another thing with the filibuster. Do you think they should give up the filibuster? I actually
What are you fucking kidding me? Have we met? Where did I work? On Capitol Hill. Of course they shouldn't give up the filibuster. And Republicans went to the White House today and said to Trump, shut up. You derailed a deal. You screwed this up. Stop talking about the filibuster. We're not going to do it. And of course, the reason is Trump is a short-termer, right? Trump only cares for the next.
Yes, he's not even thinking about the next president.
Absolutely
Who might be
appalling.
the next president?
It is insanity to give it up. It is what stands between us and mob rule. The filibuster, but Chava, the filibuster has to stay put when the Democrats are in control as well. That's the thing. Last time we were saved by Kristen Sinema and who's the weird sweatshirt guy? Pennsylvania?
Fetterman.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
Who the Democratic Party is just like.
I know, but still, but we were saved by Fetterman and Sinema and by Manchin, right? And Manchin and Sinema are both gone. Okay, they were the ones who stopped the Democratic Party from taking away the filibuster, and now
didn't John McCain stop
Manchin? Right?
Didn't John McCain stop when it was about the ACA and Trump wanted to?
John McCain was dead. John McCain was dead by the time that Trump was president.
during the first term.
Could be. Don't remember.
Yeah, there was something with Obamacare. And during the first term, John McCain was the
but Democrats were in charge then.
Yeah. Anywho, it'll be interesting to see if they're able to. It sounds like there some.
It sounds like it might happen this weekend. Could happen this weekend. Could happen. It's ridiculousness. They need to do it. I'm sorry. I'm adjusting everything because I need to plug in my charger, baby.
Okay.
So it might happen. Hopefully.
I just heard you on Meet the Press talking about Pelosi. Pelosi has announced that she will not seek re-election, so she's out.
Right.
It was you said, I think you shouldn't be 85 and retiring, but here we are.
Damn straight.
But I agree with you in the sense that, look, whether you agree with her policies or not, she was an effective speaker for her party.
Uh-huh.
And she represents this end of an era of American political power on the governing rather than the, party, the performance of it all, I think. Um,
I'm not a
you
big
know,
Pelosi fan, but I'm
I know you're not, but
certainly gonna miss the part of I'm gonna miss the part of the Democratic Party that she did fundamentally represent. Sure, she stuffed Obamacare down our throats and she sided with with the White House uncritically. But at the end of the day, she was a much more conservative Democrat than the average Democrat that we're seeing in the House right now. And we are going to miss her so much, so
but
much.
also don't forget, she didn't. I mean, when you look at what's happened to the Republicans in the House over the last few years, I mean, she had party discipline, man. I mean, she didn't lose floor votes. She made those
Yeah.
calls, she whipped the votes, and
Oh,
enough
yes.
to
No,
the
you're
vote
right
to the
about
floor
that. Oh, she
that,
was
I mean,
absolutely
how many
ruthless.
times did Kevin McCarthy have to
Oh,
vote
yeah.
himself into being the speaker? I mean, she knew how to be a speaker, and you
Well,
know,
she was a ruthless person, and I can attest to that by the way she treated people who went against her, including some good Democratic friends of mine, former members of Congress. Hey, sorry guys, I didn't charge my phone enough, and my battery stinks. Send a complaint to Apple. So that's what I'm doing right now is moving everything around so I can get nearer my charger because I don't have my proper length cord because apparently I'm not actually a
okay,
professional.
TLDR.
Anyway.
Anyway, um, let's talk about. She's gonna
That
take
was
her
so
thing.
rude.
That was I've been waiting to say TLDR. It's really not about this.
I know, that was hilarious. All right, I hope I'm
Um,
plugged in, but I don't think I
let's
am.
talk about what's going on with the Republicans and this Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes Heritage Foundation
All right, I
appointing.
have a lot to say about it, but my charger isn't working, so let me yell up to my husband. Hey, Steven, can you bring me a charger? Let's hope he
Can he
heard
hear
that.
you?
He can hear me because the study is right above mine, but I'm at 2%. So if you lose me, I'm going to end up running upstairs getting my
I'll
charger.
tell you exactly how she feels if she loses. But Danny has.
Exactly. So I
I'll
wrote
save
about
some of
this.
that.
I
So
wrote about this morning. But why don't we talk about
basically,
your thing first? Listen, Elise, talk about
yeah.
China
Okay,
and
I'll
tell
talk about
everybody
China.
about your thing while I get a charger.
Okay. Okay. So China, we didn't get to talk about China last week. I mean, this news goes so fast. You wouldn't think like last week, President Trump was meeting with President Xi. It feels like weeks ago, but he met with President Xi. He got so they walked it back from the on the trade war. It's good that they walked back from the brink. US cut fentanyl tariffs by I think 20% to 10%. China agreed to pause um rare earth mineral export controls, which the US really needs. They're critical for smartphones, your electric cars, all of that renewable energy. And China controls about 70% of the global production and processes of rare earth minerals. So, 3 weeks before the summit, the Chinese imposed these controls they're really existential to the US, requiring licenses for these rare earth minerals. Trump needed the deal. He had been talking tough about Xi, but in the end, the US needed this deal. So basically, what happened is he got Xi to agree to buy more soybeans from Americans, which farmers are really hurting because there were all these tariffs on China, and China refused to buy American soybeans. But he also got the Chinese to lift the exports controls on rare earth minerals, I think for about a year. And he was outmaneuvered. Why? Because Danny said this about 5 minutes ago. Trump is only playing for this presidency. He got a deal with Xi. He was allowed to have his, day in the sun in his photo op. President Xi is thinking 20 years down the line. President Xi is playing the long game. President Trump is playing till, 2026, because I mean, if he's not a lame duck, and Dany just said he's a lame duck now, he's definitely not playing the long game for what's in America's best interest.
Right. Sorry for
Go.
my unbelievable unprofessional technological problems. Look, you wrote a great piece. I think you're exactly right. If anybody's interested, really good piece by Scott Lincecum, who writes a newsletter for the Dispatch called The Capitalist. And he really goes through the numbers and talks about the deal. At this point, the Chinese are getting a better deal from the United States than Vietnam, Malaysia, all these countries where all of our manufacturers went from China because of human rights, because of tariffs, because of circumstances. All of those countries now have higher tariffs than the Chinese. So the idea that Trump is playing a tough game, that he's securing real concessions, is really untrue. And Scott name checks our own Derek Scissors at AEI, who's really, really good on this. We'll put both of them in the show notes, but it's a really good piece. And now I can talk about the battle in the Republican Party. I'm very sorry. I've done a lot of talking about this. I wrote about this on Monday, and we'll put that up.
And you
Look,
also interviewed my friend Eli Lake,
yeah, we did, and that's out
of the
tomorrow
Free
morning.
Press, and that's out tomorrow morning on your podcast. He wrote a whole thing about heritage, and I think it was more about like the wider issue about heritage. But talk about this. Tucker Carlson interviewed Nick Fuentes, basically was a fluffer for him, and and then Heritage kind of praised him too. So go ahead.
So look, this is the problem. Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News a couple years ago. He was already fringy then. He has since dived deep into the fever swamps of conspiracy theorizing. If you think his problem with the Jews is something that is, don't ask Patrick what a fluffer is. Go look it up. Elise is not going to explain it to you.
But you should know. But you should know.
But you should know. But we're not going to talk about it. We're a family program. In any case, if you think he's bad on the Jews and on Hitler, he's become a 9/11 truther. Just in case you were wondering.
And a Putin lover.
So I'm gonna come to that because I think it's really important to understand. So earlier this year, Tucker Carlson had I cannot remember this guy's name, Daryl Cooper, I think it is, a quote unquote historian. And called him the best historian in America. This is a guy who's pro-Hitler, who believes that World War II was the fault not of the genocidal tyrant in Berlin, but instead of Winston Churchill. So this was already like a cutoff point. But the Heritage Foundation, which is our sister institution, I work at AEI, we're a center-right think tank. You guys know I'm a conservative. The bottom line is that that Heritage was continuing to support Tucker. They were actually paying money to sponsor his whatever it is podcast TV show that he runs on X, and the problem here is that this was the decision of the boss. This was the decision of Kevin Roberts. The Heritage Foundation was founded by Ed Fulner. It was a Reaganite, pro-Israel, anti-communist organization, and it was absolutely full of wonderful people. It is still full of wonderful people who feel betrayed by what happened. Then last week, all of a sudden, after Nick Fuentes, who is a white nationalist, a quarter Mexican white nationalist, Stephen
And
said
an anti-Semite.
Stephen said this morning, "This is how great America is. Even a Mexican can become a white nationalist."
We're equal opportunity.
We are. So anyway, so he had Nick Fuentes on. This is appalling. Nick Fuentes is not just an anti-Semite, not just a Hitler lover. And when I say Hitler lover, he says, "I love Hitler." He is a misogynist. He is a racist. He is a pig. He called J.D. Vance's wife an ethnic slur and referred to the Vice President of the United States and his Indian-born wife at their children as mongrels. Okay. This is
Well,
how bad they are.
do I remember JD Vance coming back against him? I don't know that he really did, but anyway.
I don't think he did. And that's something else to talk about. We go through, listen, there's too much here. We go through all of this with Eli Lake on the podcast tomorrow. Really listen to it. I go
We'll put
through
it
a
in the
bunch
show
of it.
notes.
I go through a bunch of it with on my Substack, and I did on Monday. We'll add that too. But the bottom line is that I feel terrible for my friends at Heritage and for the Jewish, not the Jewish members, all of the members, Christians as well, of the anti-Semitism task force that was housed at Heritage.
Let me
It's just awful.
let me ask you a question, and then we'll cut it off because we're at 6 o'clock. Do you think that, they, as you said, they were a very conservative organization over the years, started working with MAGA, and started flirting with some of these. There is a strain of MAGA that is
Not with Tucker and not with Tucker and Nick Fuentes anymore. Nick Fuentes denigrates the president constantly, denigrates J.D. Vance, and Tucker has opposed the president on almost everything.
So, but they're still supporting Trump?
No.
Heritage.
Oh, Heritage, yes. Tucker, not so much. Yeah,
Well,
they are. They're very, they remain. But you know what? Look,
playing foot. Like, I mean, I'll quote your best friend. I'll quote your best friend, Hillary Clinton. You can't lay down with snakes. And then I'm going to mix the metaphor again. She said this while we were in Pakistan, and it was about Pakistan's support for Haqqani and these groups, and the relationship between the ISI and the terrorists. And she said, you can't lay down with snakes and then be upset that they're in your bedroom or they're in your backyard or something like that.
Great story.
But, you can't, all this stuff comes back to bite you, is basically.
Right. And it's coming back to bite Kevin Roberts. And part of the problem is he doesn't want to lose the friendship of Tucker Carlson. And the answer is, you know what? Sometimes your quote unquote friends go too far and you need to. Yeah. And David, yes, we need to care about Tucker Carlson. If you are like me, and even if you aren't a conservative, the idea that I'm going to go around and talk about the anti-Semitic, dangerous mayor-elect of New York, and that I'm going to ignore somebody who has millions of followers, who is one of the most popular podcasts in the nation, and who professes himself to be a conservative, is not right. Not a chance. We police our own.
I think Senator Ted Cruz has been very principled on this too.
Wonderful. But so is Speaker Mike Johnson. So is Mitch McConnell. So is Thune. So is Josh Hawley, who I don't agree with on a lot of stuff. So all of these guys have been very tough. Who has stunk, other than Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation? J.D. Vance. And we can talk some more about that next week.
Yes, we will. Okay, everybody. Thank you.
Sorry about my tech stuff. I really apologize. I'll be a grown-up next time, I swear.
Thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Love your haircut, baby.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.